So, how would you set random colors on objects? This is something that's actually pretty easy to do in Project Spark. To give you a good example of why you might want to set random colors on objects, say we have a sphere right here, but we want to have a few of these, and we want them to look a bit different. Well, we could individually color each one of these to make them look different, or we could just simply set a random color that each one of these gets assigned at the very start, so that makes them look different. So let's start out with just setting the random color for the sphere. So let's go ahead and jump into the brain of this sphere right here. And let's show you how to set up a random color. So we're going to put these under the once tile because we want this to happen once at the very beginning of the game. We're just going to make, we're going to have 2 lines of code. We're going to make both of these child lines under once just to make it a bit more readable for you. And the first thing we want to do is we want to set a color variable. So on the first line, on the do side, we're going to go over to values, color, and let's go ahead and set a new color variable. We're just going to call this random. And then we are going to set random equal to some sort of random number. So if you go to math, then you'll find a random number, but you can't find math here. And that's because you need to, in order to use the random math tile, you need to actually convert color into some sort of number format. And the way that color is converted into number format is through hue. So you can look in color properties after you put in a color variable like random, and you'll see hue. And hue basically confines every major color on the spectrum between 0 and 1, and both 0 and 1 are red. So between red in the spectrum, which goes to purple, orange, green, blue, and so on and so forth. So we want to select hue here, and now we can set this equal to, let's go over to math, random number, and we can set this equal to a random number between 0 to 1. And this is going to take a color from that hue spectrum using decimal points anywhere from 0 to 1 to find some sort of color. Now we can just apply that color to this object by going to appearance, go over, you're going to see color properties, and for this we're going to choose solid color because this sphere only has one color, so we want to just make it a solid color. And we're going to say solid color is equal to, let's grab this, random, which is the color variable we set up here. Great. So let's jump into test. And you see an orange sphere right here. Let's just do restart. Now you see a red sphere right here. Let's hit restart again. You see an orange sphere again. Let's hit restart. We see purple. And let's hit edit, and let's just create a bunch of these. So we're just going to create a bunch of different spheres right here. We go into test. And now we're going to see a bunch of different spheres which are all different colors, creating some very easy, quick variety between different objects. This is really useful if you have a number of enemies, you want them to have, say, slightly different clothing, slightly different looks. You can do that by setting their random color. So the only problem with using hue, which we're using right now, is it doesn't take anything from the grayscale. So more saturated, less saturated colors, grayer colors, less, more pastel-y colors, darker colors, those aren't taken into account within hue. So we can add in another line here. We're going to capture random again. We're going to go to color properties, and we're going to choose saturation. And this basically picks how washed out or how dark the color is that we're going to be pulling in. And then we can set saturation equal to basically the same thing up here, random number between 0 to 1. So we're just going to basically copy all of that. Line 2 and line 3 are now the exact same, except for they're both setting hue and saturation. And now this allows us to get into darker, lighter colors. So this gives us a lot more variance than just pure colors that we are setting with hue. And before we jump into test, the next thing I'm going to do is actually change this color and update it every 5 frames. And there are 30 frames per second in Project Spark, so this is going to update pretty fast. So instead of once, I'm going to replace this with a countdown timer of, let's go to values, numbers, set a new number, 5. We're going to set this in frames, and we're going to make this loop. So what this does is every 5 frames, it resets this color variable called random. It resets the hue and saturation to a random number, and then sets that solid color to be equal to that. So every 5 frames, the color should change. Jump in and test again. And now we can see rapid flashing colors. But you'll also notice while before we had much purer colors, you're going to see in the mix here darker colors, more pastel-y colors, a lot more variety there, things that look more natural. So you can really play around with the saturation to get your colors more washed out looking or darker looking or brighter looking, however you want to make them. So that's all great for the sphere, which has just really one color channel, this solid color we want to set. But what about something like this Codite crystal, where say we want to set the color of the rock and also the color of the crystals as 2 separate things? This is where color channels come into play. So we're going to move aside this little guy right here. Let's just remove all of his code here so he's not going to be flashing in the background. And let's build out this Codite crystal so that the crystals have one unique color and the rock has another unique color. So just like before, underneath of once, we are going to go ahead and go into color again and choose the color variable random. Just like before, we're going to set the hue of this to be equal to a random number between 0 and 1. So we set that right here. So now the hue of random is equal to 0 and 1. And also underneath once, we are going to now call that color by going to Appearance, going to Color Properties. And now you're going to see, besides solid color, we also have primary color, secondary color, and tertiary color. So every prop takes its colors into 3 different color channels, and these can be applied to each prop in different ways. So I know by testing out with my Codite crystal that the primary color is the color of the stone, the secondary color is the color of the crystals. So we're going to say primary color is going to be equal to random here. So that's great. Let's just jump into test here. And now we see the stone is this cool blue color, looking really, really nice and cool. So let's go ahead and set the crystals. So to set the crystal color, we need another color variable. So we're going to go back to Values, Color, New Color Variable. We're going to call this Random2. And now I'm just going to copy everything from the second line up here down to the third line. So Random2 hue equals random number 0 to 1. We're going to create a 5th line here where you are going to go over to Appearance and choose Secondary Color from Color Properties. And then we are going to set secondary color is equal to random2. So this is setting 2 different color variables to be each equal to a unique random number between 0 and 1, and then each one is independently being pulled into the primary and secondary color slots. So we jump into test to see how this looks like, and now we see a red rock and some that looks kind of purpley crystals. Let's hit restart, and we see both of these are purple now. Hit restart again, and now we have dark green and a yellowish green. And you might be looking at this and saying, well, these colors are really similar. And the reason for that is, again, we are setting these colors with a hue of 0 to 1, but saturation for all of them is set up at 1. So if you want some more color variety here, then we can go ahead and let's just copy this line 2 down to line 3 and say random color saturation is equal to some random number between 0 and 1, and then random, let's take random 2, line 4, and copy that, Now we can say random 2 saturation is equal to a random number between 0 and 1. And that now gives us the kind of full spectrum of colors here. So we jump back into test, and we're going to see a lot more color variety here. So let's just hit restart a few times. So we see red and some yellowish. We see blue and some grayish yellow coloring here. We see purple and light blue. So that opens up a lot more colors for us. So just keep that in mind when you're setting random colors, and have a lot of fun with using random colors to create unique looking objects that look different each time you play.
Project Spark is where players create and creators play. What better way to be inspired than to see what's possible? This will surely spark your imagination. Now, how do we begin?